Hi, I'm Megan Skidmore, and this is the Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. I'm a woman, daughter, sister, spouse, mother, life coach, and person of faith on a mission to normalize asking questions and allowing doubts, not only in a faith journey, but in all aspects of life. Join me in bringing this traditionally taboo topic out of the shadows of shame and into the light. I'm a firm believer that we normalize through more talking and engaging in discussion. More talking peels back, exposes, and erases the layers of shame associated with questions and doubts. When we're more authentic about our journey, we are more powerful because shame has no power in the face of authenticity. My next special guest for Pride Month is Richard, quote, Papa Ostler, who has self-described as an LGBTQ plus ally ever since serving as a bishop of a young single adult ward. He regularly shares content which encourages and gives ideas on how to better create Zion by more fully embracing those walking a unique road, such as LGBTQ plus, to better see their gifts and contributions, provide more support, and help them feel they belong. He recently tweeted, "When I see a pride flag, I think of a closeted queer youth and the message of hope and support it sends to them. Giving a closeted queer youth more hope and support is a good thing." Indeed it is, Papa. Offering hope is always a good thing. Welcome, everyone, to the Beyond the Shadow of Doubt podcast. I'm already emotional. What the heck? I'm super humbled and excited to have. All right, let's just get the tears out and then I can take a deep breath here. To have Richard Papa Ostler today. And I don't know if you knew, you're on Mormonwiki, but I was looking up your website to have a short intro for you, and Mormonwiki came up. I thought this was pretty hilarious, but you tell me, Papa, if this sounds about right, the way that you're listed here. Richard Ostler, known as Papa Ostler, works to build bridges with LGBTQ members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He is a former bishop of a young single adult ward and the host of Listen, Learn, and Love podcast. The podcast is a platform for LGBTQ Latter-day Saints to share their stories and also includes stories from those sharing their experience with repentance, being an early release missionary, solving porn, emotional illness, death, faith crisis, and many other topics. The name Papa Ostler happened when his high school-aged son, Matt, introduced him to Twitter in 2010. He wanted the high school kids to know he wasn't one of their peers as he interacted with them, so the name Papa Ostler was created. Ostler is also the author of Listen, Learn, and Love, Embracing LGBTQ Latter-day Saints, published in 2020, and Listen, Learn, and Love, Improving Latter-day Saint Culture, published in 2022. Does that sound about right?
That sounds great, Megan.
Yeah, and that's just not even the tip of the iceberg of the many wonderful things that you are and that you have done. And I will leave links to your website and to your 2 books in the show notes, of course, so that everyone listening has the opportunity to get to know you for themselves. Having said that, I want to give you a chance to fill in those blanks. Share with us your origin story, your background, so we can get to know you a little bit better, your family of origin. I know you were raised in Salt Lake, so I'm going to guess your faith of origin is LDS, but maybe not. Just your growing up years, interests, all of those good things.
Well, thank you, Megan. It's really an honor to be on your podcast and the work you're doing with this podcast, your work as a life coach, as a mother, and just the different spaces you're in, blessing people's lives. And the work you're doing as a life coach is really needed. I'm glad you started this podcast, Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. What a terrific name. Yeah, your listeners, I'm a married father of 6. I married, my wife is from Houston, Texas, and I grew up Latter-day Saint, still am Latter-day Saint. I'm in my early 60s, so we have all of our kids out of the house and 4 of 6 married and 4 grandkids. And I was a singles ward bishop about 8 years ago is when that assignment started. And it was a pretty typical assignment. The thing that changed me significantly is I had a couple gay men in my ward, and it was the first time I really listened to gay men tell me about being gay. And that's sort of the journey that I've been on ever since I felt a rebuke of the Spirit that I had let straight people define this group of people about me, and I had developed incorrect conclusions or opinions. Some were accurate, but a lot were not. And Heavenly Father just invited me to listen to LGBTQ people so that I could better, in this case, honor my priesthood responsibility to help these good men versus add to their burdens with my uninformed opinions. So that's kind of the beginning of the road that you're talking about that started back about 8 to 10 years ago.
I love that so much. I love that your podcast gives a platform for stories to be shared. And, in many ways, mine is similar. However, my focus is normalizing the having questions and allowing doubts as part of a faith journey, which is a part of all of our stories. Because I think for me, I really noticed, your body doesn't lie. And I noticed the tension I would feel as part of my faith journey when it took a pivot, when I learned I had LGBTQ plus child, and trying to reconcile that with, conservative faith, our LDS faith. I could feel the tension. I could feel the resistance or the struggle in trying to allow these questions that were coming up for me and even doubts. In part of my journey is, I've studied the origin of the word doubt. In episode 12, I talk about it. And doubt can be a noun or it can be a verb. And as a noun, it is to be uncertain. As a verb, it is to purposely suspend judgment. And so I have really tried to keep that in mind when I have these discussions and when I'm talking about this part of the faith journey, because traditionally there's so much judgment surrounding having questions and asking, or just giving oneself permission to ask them and to lean into doubts. And so I say that to preface, I would love for you to share about points in your faith journey and specifically moments when you could feel you were pivoting or that you could feel a shift, if that makes sense. And I know you do share some of this in your books and whatnot, but I would love to get it straight from you personally. Like, did you feel some resistance coming up and that kind of thing, just in general?
Yeah, I mean, this is a space I'm glad you're talking about. We need to normalize the word doubt and questions and faith journeys and destigmatize it. And so we can talk about it in our families and congregations. I, as part of listening to these gay men, recognize the complexity of their road. And it caused what I call a mini faith crisis in me. And the way I frame that up is I had some dominoes that fell regarding some historical things and where we are currently, but dominoes that stand. Basically, the dominoes that stand are fundamental belief in the restoration of the gospel and the unique doctrine that came through the restoration. It brings hope and healing. And so if I look at my belief system in the church, it used to be all standing dominoes. Now it has a few fallen dominoes and standing dominoes, but dominoes, the idea is when one falls, they all fall. But I've learned that I have dominoes that have fallen, but the rest of them haven't. And I opened up to a stake president about my quote unquote fallen dominoes. And he didn't sort of make it all about my fallen dominoes, tried to stand them up. He tried to focus on what I still believed in and make my way forward that way. So I still have fallen dominoes. They're not temple recommend questions that would keep me out of the temple, but they're things I'm uncomfortable about in our church history. Polygamy would be one, and where we are supporting LGBTQ Latter-day Saints would be another one. And so that's kind of the model I've used. I sort of thought at the time this happened, because it was painful, and you would understand that, some of your listeners, you don't want to go through a faith crisis or a faith transition or a faith pivot, but I'm actually glad it happened. It was painful, but it wasn't like falling backwards. It was actually brought me to a place, for me anyway, that was a more sustainable relationship with the church, to be able to have tools to navigate things that are difficult in our church history or where we are currently. I've kind of said that as a return missionary, the tools I use to bring somebody in the church, but to keep somebody in the church are completely different tools. And if we just resort to read, pray, and go to church, that may help someone stay in the church, but they need different tools. And I talk about that in chapter 10 of my book about culture. The other thing is we need to develop better vocabulary about how we talk about people that have questions and doubt, and normalize that. And even as a bishop or as a Sunday school teacher, as a leader, say, this is how we will handle questions. If you have questions in our ward or in our classroom, we will respond this way. And we will first say, that is a great question. Thank you for the courage to ask that question, and sort of pre-create the culture so that people know, either in a class setting or individual, that you are a safe person to open up to. Parents can do that too, so that they're saying kind things about people that have questions about our church. They could even say kind things about people that have stepped away from the church. I don't think that causes their kids to leave the church, but it communicates to their kids that mom and dad or a sibling is a safe person for me to open up to about questions. We can always open up to people that have left the church. They can have the conversation. And we may conclude that that's where we belong, is with people that have left the church. But if we can find community in the church of people that will let us sit with our questions and perhaps fall in dominoes as we make our way forward, then we feel community within the church. So that's kind of some principles. I did a Twitter poll. The book that Megan's referring to, the second book, is called Listen, Learn, and Love, Improving Latter-day Saint Culture. And chapter 10 is ministering to those with questions. And one of the Twitter polls I did is, if you have a temple recommend, indicate your level of belief in the church. And 41% said no, I know it's true. 33% believe. 15% said hope, and 11 said not sure. But yet they all have a temple recommend. And so we've sort of normalized, I know the church is true with every fiber of my being testimony. But at least in this Twitter poll, less than half of our active members have that kind of testimony. So if that's all they hear at the testimony meeting, they may falsely conclude that they don't belong there. There's DNC 46 talks about, to some it's given to know, to some it's given to believes. So that person with a I believe or I hope testimony, they may feel shame for that. They shouldn't. They just may have different spiritual gifts. Behind that person may be someone equally committed to the gospel of Jesus Christ. They just have different spiritual gifts. So we need to normalize that and not have everybody feel like they have an I know the church is true testimony. For people that do, that's great. I'm not saying don't have that or don't share it, but create space for different testimony types. And that, to me, is part of Zion.
I agree so much. Creating more spaces, a bigger space, a more broad, open, less defined space. You said earlier, you talked about the dominoes analogy. And, one of the things I do as a life coach is I really help my clients see where they're black and white thinking, all or nothing, the 50-50 way of thinking that it comes normal to us as humans, but how it can actually hurt us, that it doesn't have to be all of the dominoes standing or just throw them all out, right? It's not a problem to have some of them standing. It's actually very normal. And that's why I love these spaces, and that you're willing to share that with me and with our listeners, that it's so true. I think the more we would talk about these things openly, the more we would see and feel of one another's hearts and where we're really at in our faith journeys.
Yeah. I mean, one of the greatest quotes from a general authority in this space is Elder Uchtdorf, where he said, there's no sign at the door that says your testimony needs to be this high to enter. And I think he's teaching a principle there that scales, is that everybody should feel welcome in an LDS congregation. The gate is wide. There's no belief or behavior hurdle to feel welcome. To go to the temple, there is a belief and behavior hurdle. So the gate kind of narrows there, but we shouldn't culturally bring that backwards into our congregations or even into our families. And I think when we create a feeling of acceptance and everybody's on their own journey at church, then more people perhaps get to the temple, but they just feel like they belong at church wherever they are, either working through commandments, which we all are, or working through our testimonies. So I like this idea that somebody shared on Twitter one day. We're called to be gatherers and not sifters. Our job is to gather. The gathering of Israel includes that person praying for the missionaries to knock on their door and our own members. And we don't maybe think of gathering of Israel being people in our own congregation, but I think of that now. And what can I do to help gather? I think of LGBTQ Latter-day Saints, and what can we do to gather them so they feel welcome? I think most people my age would think of gay people, and they would think of a different group of people walking on a different road that sort of poses a threat. That's how I thought about gay people. Now I see them as our own Latter-day Saint people. You have an LGBTQ child, I think you mentioned. A lot of parents do. There's a lot of LGBTQ members attending, and they need to be flooded with kind messages about people like them, whether they're out or not. There are LGBTQ people statistically in every LDS congregation, and they're sort of hearing everything that's being said about people like them. And most of the content they hear is not kind, because we sort of have the mindset I used to have. It's this outside a group of people that somehow poses a threat to me. So my job as a Latter-day Saint maybe is to sort of rally around, sort of make them a common enemy. Intimacy is a Brene Brown idea.
This us versus them type of perception, which is truly the antithesis of gathering.
Good point.
I love all that you're sharing. You're pointing out how there is application in the home, which is where really all of this starts. These discussions, this creating of these safe spaces, allowing questions, not shaming others for doubts that they might share with you or the questions that they pose to you. It starts in the home. I would love to, I know you were older, and so this could look for that you went through. Sorry. That is not what I meant.
Well, I mean, I'm older than most of your guests, so
no, actually, I look at the stats and I see you're right. You're right there. Most of my numbers are they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Yeah, it's the whole gamut. What I meant was when you had your pivot in your faith journey. And some of the listeners of my podcast are parents, and so they're considering what is a part of their world is their children, which, that can be. Kids are younger and younger when they are bringing up the real heartfelt, important stuff, the important questions and significant things these days. And so if you could share, how did you navigate this shift with your family first, your spouse, kids, maybe your extended family, and their response, or did you share it with them? Well, I mean, obviously they know now. And, eventually your faith community. And what was that all like?
Yeah, I guess my shift was, some people will shift, and part of their shift is they step away from the church. And so that's a different shift, because I'm in the church and fully participating. And so that was probably less dramatic, I don't even want to use the word dramatic. So my wife and I navigated that.
Or significant, maybe.
Yeah, we have adult children. They could kind of comprehend that Dad's faith was pivoting, but Dad wasn't leaving the church. I'm a temple worker, so I'm pretty much all in. I just have dominoes that have fallen. I have nuance in my testimony, and
for sure, I understand. Yeah,
I spoke in my stake president had me speak in stake conference about my own, I call it my mini faith crisis. So he felt comfortable enough for me to share that. That kind of became chapter 10 of that second book, was that talk. I became the chapter. And so my faith community, my family has been pretty open to this. I recognize if I'd stepped away from the church, I wouldn't be speaking at stake conference.
Yes.
That would have created some challenges potentially in our family. But I've seen families, navigate that and stay really healthy if the goals of the family are still unity, common goals of supporting each other and loving each other. I've seen shifts within families, and the family circle stays strong. Parents sometimes have to reconstruct the relationship with their children because so much of it was about the church and the milestones in the church and the joint shared experiences. And you would know this as a life coach. If LDS parents have children that have left the church, it takes work on both parts, but sometimes those relationships can be terrific, but they have to sort of reconstruct the relationship around common interests. And the church isn't one generally at that point. And my parents did that with my brother growing up, and my brother's not in the church, and my dad passed away in his 91st year, and they had a great relationship. And it was this beautiful love story where they found ways to have a great relationship. And it wasn't just always about getting my brother back in the church.
Yeah.
Now, for you that have kids at home, I would do some things differently because I think one of the most important things a parent can do is walk with their kids with the reality of their life. And so I would still teach our children the gospel and invite them to live the gospel and say, this is our family values and the church values, and we invite you to live those. And these are family rules maybe that we expect you to follow, like curfew. But I'd say if you have questions about the church, this is how I'll respond. If you're messing up, if you're viewing pornography or become sexually active or living outside the teachings of the church, and you tell me that, this is how I will respond, because I want to walk with my kids. And I can do that, not sell out, our family values, the church values, but I find that my best parenting moments, and I wasn't a perfect parent, often when kids would open up about the reality of their lives, and we could sort of walk that road together, and that they knew I was a trusted partner. I still invited, and we still had our family values, but unless it was a harmful situation where they were stealing for a drug habit. None of our kids had a drug habit, but, and I think you can create a culture in your family where you're just saying kind things about people in other faiths, people that have gone through a divorce, people that perhaps have stepped away from the faith, people that have gone to jail, and say, well, that's still a good person that made a mistake. It just creates a family culture. If you're a local leader, that, gosh, I can open up to this person. An example of that is when I was a YSA bishop, I was on social media. That's another story. And I started to say kind things about gay people on social media. Nothing dramatic, just kind of what the church taught. And no more gay people came out to me, but several of the straight members in the ward said, okay, I can talk to this guy. If he's going to proactively say kind things about LGBTQ people, he can handle the realities of my life. And it was a powerful principle of just ministering.
It's so true.
And so people need to sort of, don't do it like me, do it what's right for you. But those are principles that might be helpful for you in your circles of influence.
For sure. I love what you say. Thanks for listening to part 1 of my interview with Papa Ostler. Make sure to subscribe and follow so as not to miss when part 2 publishes, bonus episode number 39. Also, currently I'm hosting a podcast giveaway. Just leave a review on Apple Podcasts, screenshot it, and upload it to my Google Doc. After you review on Apple Podcasts, for a bonus entry, leave a rating on Spotify. The link to enter and to the Google Doc is in the show notes or in the bio of my Instagram profile. Come join me in Hopeful Spaces, a Dallas Hope Charities component of Hopeful Discussions, which is sponsored by Mercedes-Benz Financial Services USA. Hopeful Spaces is a monthly parent, caregiver, and ally support group facilitated by Megan Skidmore Coaching. To join is free. Simply send an email to chc@dallashopecharities.org. Visit meganskidmorecoaching.com, where you can find this podcast, as well as additional free resources. Check the podcast show notes on any platform for links to sources cited. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram for more and to send me a DM. To help the podcast grow, please follow, rate, and review, as well as share it with a friend. Beyond the Shadow of Doubt is a proud member of the Dialogue Podcast Network, which is a part of the Dialogue Journal found at dialoguejournal.com/podcast network. Founder Eugene England was a Mormon writer, teacher, and scholar who wrote, "My faith encourages my curiosity and awe. It thrusts me out into relationship with all creation and encourages me to enter into dialogue. My hope is that this podcast is an extension of that vision." Thanks for being here. Until next time.